Okay, dear students and viewers, today I have brought a very interesting lecture for you people, and this lecture is a comparative study of Gandhi and Subhas. Some of the students have placed this demand much earlier, but today I think this is the appropriate day because just the 125th birth anniversary of Subhas has been celebrated. This birth anniversary was very special, as on this anniversary there was the declaration of the special day for Subhas, Parakram Divas, and a lot of reverence was paid to him by the nation, by the government, and from every quarter. But here I have to share something with you people. I used to watch some TV program, just did before study. So I was slightly grieved, slightly pained, slightly frustrated. Even today, the conversation is going on very trivial things, very, you can say, the useless things. The same conspiracy theories about the same his life of seclusion as a saint, his putting into dungeon secretly for years, the role of Russia and so on, the same thing. And particularly the role of Congress as well as Nehru family, the old feud between Gandhi and Subhas, and the same vituperative and, you can say, uncalled for language for Gandhi and so on. I think this is not simply disservice to Gandhi or other members of the Congress, but even disservice to Subhas. Because Subhas was not the type of leader today normally the scholars and political leaders are conceiving about him. He was a very different type of leader. And at that time, you should not treat Congress as a party of Rahul Gandhi, Sonia Gandhi. The Congress was at that time a national movement. You will find today, if any old-age leader, any experienced leader in India, so they are having either direct or indirect relations with the Congress as a movement. I am not talking in terms of the Congress as a party. So today I have decided to bring a lecture, and rather you can say present a lecture to you people in order to give some special focus over the achievements and career of Subhas, his relationship with Gandhi, and even his relationship with Nehru. So everything should be crystal clear. I think ignore all the things, make concentrated over three things. That will be more useful. Subhas and evaluation. On an evaluation, the first aspect, his journey of 2 decades in Indian politics. And its trends. The first one aspect, कि Subhas spent 2 decades in Indian politics. If we are doing or evaluating Subhas, and particularly when Subhas became out of scene, when after INA career and he met his end in a very mysterious situation what may be the cause of death, it is still a, you can say, matter of mystery. But to greater extent, it has almost been decided that possibly he might have died through a plane crash. But here I am not here to give a final verdict of what happened to him. Simply here my point is that a lot of conjecture is being made if Subhash could have survived, if Subhash could have been, you can say, come out from this crisis to address nation after that, or he might have come on the national scene, he could have led the nation this and that manner, and this could have been the direction of national politics under the leadership of Subhash. This could have been the fate of Gandhi, Nehru, or other leaders. So my student, here I have to inform you, in order to make evaluation of the estimated career of Subhash, it is better to give focus over his previous record. What was the journey and its trends of in his 2 decades career? It is better to focus over it first. First thing, Subhash was having much common thing, and Subhash was having a lot of things in common with Nehru. Be clear. You should not make a juxtapose Nehru and Subhash first, because even on the basis of his birth, his elite background, his education, and his perception towards politics, he was having a lot of things common with Nehru. Both were the product of Cambridge University, Both were born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Both were lawyer's son. Both were from affluent family. And both were having in touch with international and latest current of international politics. Both were having their socialist lineage and the socialist inclinations. So both were having some, you can say, and both were having some flirtation with socialism, you can say. So in this way, both were having a lot of things in common. So in place of any other leader, Subhash was much near to Nehru. Normally, Subhash is being juxtaposed against Nehru, and Nehru is supposed to be a very cruel rival to Subhash, but both were having a lot of things in common. The first thing, both were almost launched in Indian politics at the same time, although Nehru was 8 years elder than Subhash. Nehru was 8 years old and Subhash were 8 years younger. And Nehru started Indian politics slightly earlier, because Nehru participated even at that time in first Home Rule movement, and after that he became active in a peasant movement at Pratapgarh. About Nehru we will come to know. Subhash just returned to India after resigning from civil services in 1920, and surprisingly at that time Mahatma Gandhi was likely to launch the non-cooperation movement. Mahatma Gandhi at that time just went to Bombay, and normally in Bombay he used to stay or address the people in a particular house that was known as Mani Bhawan. So Gandhi was addressing leaders as well as the political overweight at that time in Mani Bhavan in Bombay. At the same time, Subhash just came from London and he anchored at Bombay coast, and then he moved to the same Mani Bhavan. Although he was slightly, you can say, in a very embarrassing position, because he was in a western suit and all the members in this Mani Bhavan was wearing simply khadi and simple dress. So Subhash was in awkward situation. So he firstly sought pardon from Gandhi, but Gandhi, after taking a smile, just, you can say, gave Subhash assurance it hardly matters and invited him to sit in this conference. Then Subhash posed 3 questions to Gandhi. First, what is your method of boycott politics, as well as what is your planning about no tax movement? And the second one, in what way your policy of boycott and Swadeshi will compel British to accept Swarajya for India. And third one, what is your blueprint about Swarajya? How will you ensure Swarajya in 1 year? Is it possible? So 3 questions he posed to Gandhi. Although Gandhi gave satisfactory answer to the question number first, for the second question and third question, Gandhi was slightly just tried to digress the matter and slightly reticent. So Subhash was not satisfied, and in the first meeting itself, he was unimpressed with Gandhi. He was not much impressed with Gandhi, and he slightly through his body language gave a hint to Gandhi he was not satisfied with his program. Then Gandhi suggested him better to go to Bengal and try to follow the advice of Chittaranjan Das, who was a very prestigious provincial leader of Bengal. Although he was an all India leader, but in Bengal he was uncontested, you can say the most prestigious leader at that time. Subhash was having some correspondence with C.R. Das earlier also. So Subhash moved to Calcutta, and he was really impressed with C.R. Das. And throughout his life, he really took him as his political guru, C.R. Das. So C.R. Das was much near to Subhash heart. Then non-cooperation movement started. Even Jawaharlal Nehru participated here enthusiastically. So it was in course of non-cooperation movement that Subhash guru, the guru of Subhash, you can say the political guru I have told you, that is C.R. Das and Gandhi, they developed some sort of difference in the whole course. Whenever you will go through non-cooperation movement, so you will come to hear about some story. What was the story? A story is that you might have heard about the Prince of Wales. It was the time in 1921 Prince of Wales visited India. Subhash, at that time Gandhi was not in jail. He was just moving freely because British didn't dare to put him into the jail up to this period. But C.R. Das was already in jail. Subhash was also in jail. So it was in this course you will just come to know, in fact, when Prince of Wales had to visit India, so British were apprehensive about the fact that Indian leaders would boycott the Prince of Wales. So they just tried to persuade Gandhi and the Congress leaders. The British authority or the British government tried to talk to Congress. You will release all the prisoners, and then we will arrange a roundtable conference for discussing the future constitution of India, provided if Indian leaders are not going to just cause a boycott against this Prince of Wales. So this was some sort of bargaining from the side of the British. Chittaranjan Das was in a mood to accept this proposal and this condition because Chittaranjan Das just even persuaded Subhash Chandra Bose to do that. Chittaranjan Das was having the view that although Gandhi gave a very ambitious slogan and very uncommon as well as unrealistic slogan ki Swarajya in 1 year, but Gandhian Swarajya is a very remote thing. There is no glimpse of Gandhian Swarajya in future. So it is better to give a British a chance. At least British is coming to the negotiating table and the British had to discuss about the future constitution of India. But Gandhi rejected the proposal. So there was differences between C.R. Das and Gandhi. So Subhash further got distance from Gandhi after this episode. And then Gandhi withdrew the movement. So not simply Subhash, but Nehru was equally upset. In his autobiography of India, Nehru has openly expressed his resentment against Gandhian leadership and Gandhian method of, launching and withdrawing the movement, particularly in context of this withdrawal of non-cooperation movement after Chauri Chaura. And Subhash was so upset that he even declared that it was just a national calamity for the youths. It was a national calamity. So it made further distance between these two guys. But surprisingly, you will come to know that when then we can say that within the Congress, some sort of factionalism appeared. There was a formation of two parties you might have heard about. One is pro-Gandhian party, another was the anti-Gandhian party, means one was the Swarajist party, which favored to fight the elections openly against the Gandhian wish and to make an entry into the council in order to in order to demolish the proceedings of the government. Means ki sum total, the program of this Swarajist party was to extend the policy of non-cooperation to the assembly, and Gandhian faction being led by Maulana Azad, Vallabhbhai Patel and Rajendra Prasad. So this faction was deadly opposed to this program. This faction emphasized कि no, it was against the will of Gandhi to participate in council proceedings. So better to continue boycott of council proceedings. So the Congress was on the verge of a split at that time. But it was during this critical juncture, Gandhi was released from jail. He did some sort of mediation between the two factions, and finally this split was averted in up to 1924. Then Gandhi moved to the so-called village construction program, and Swarajist moved to its own politics of council entry, and both were accepted as Congress program. But up to 1926, Swarajist finally withdrew. But in this whole Swarajist politics, Subhash Chandra Bose remained to be active, along with his guru, this Chittaranjan Das. But in 1925, there was the untimely death of Chittaranjan Das. So Subhash was much shocked at that time. After that, you will come to know that up to 1927 to 1928, the youth leaders became much active in Simon Commission Go Back movement. And then in 1928, Subhash and Nehru both came near to each other as the very close friends, close companions, close ideologues, the close activists. Means ki both came near to each other and both became active with an organization. The organization was Independence for India League, and Subhash and Nehru started the nationwide program in order to mobilize the youth in favor of the objective of complete freedom. Because up to this period, make a distinction between freedom and complete freedom. Make a distinction between Swarajya and complete freedom. Up to this period, even non-cooperation movement was launched on the objective of Swarajya. In Swarajya, you are still accepting the foreign policy as well as defense, etc. under the British control. But complete freedom means that now India is going to be going to attain the complete freedom from the British clutch and the British government. So this program of complete freedom was not earlier promoted by the Congress up to non-cooperation, and even surprisingly, even in Nehru report in 1928, you will come to know about Nehru report. Motilal Nehru presided over this commission. So at that time, Subhash Chandra Bose and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru both tried to mobilize the youth in favor of complete freedom. But Nehru report is still accepted as its objective Swarajya or dominion status, not complete freedom, dominion status. The same thing, almost same thing, with some difference. So when he declared, but it was under the youth leader Subhash and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, even Nehru report had to accept the proposal. If within 1 year the British are not ready to concede this dominion status, then the Congress would be free to adopt the proposal of Purna Swarajya or complete freedom. So my students, when the 1 year elapsed and the British didn't make a response, because British was not likely to make a response in this regard. So you might have recalled the so-called Lahore proposal and the so-called Lahore session of the Congress, which was presided over by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Subhash Chandra Bose was standing by Nehru in this objective. Up to this period, even Gandhi just came on the stage again, and he tried to, you can say, bring his influence over Nehru, or he just tried to, you can say, bring Nehru under his leadership and control. But in 1929, it was under Nehru's leadership, you will come to know, that there was the acceptance of the proposal of the Purna Swaraj. On 26 January 1930, it was celebrated as the Independence Day of India. All over India, there was a new enthusiasm for freedom or for the future freedom. So this was the contribution of the youth leaders. Not simply that. It was under the combined effort of Nehru and Subhash. The Congress was compelled to drift towards socialism. Socialism in that sense, in 1929, the Congress session was presided over by Jawaharlal Nehru at that time. So while presiding over the session, Jawaharlal Nehru declared, I am a socialist and democrat, and I am not having any faith, any confidence in kings and princes. You can very well understand here, now the youth leaders try to just mold the Congress towards socialism, mold the Congress program in favor of socialism, and to carry the Congress or chart the path of the Congress towards the direction of socialism. So later, the youth leaders were having the impressive impact on the Congress, and in 1936, this so-called Lucknow session was presided over by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And it was in this session some progressive agrarian programs. Progressive agrarian programs means कि ये किसानों के पक्ष में था. These programs were in favor of farmers, the favor of peasants. So such programs were adopted by Congress after a long time. So Nehru once again continued his leadership in Phajpur session in 1937. In consecutive 2 years, he became the president, And then in Phajpur session, the supplementary work was done in favor of socialism, means कि some more programs in favor of peasants as well as the workers, not workers, mainly in peasants. So in this way, you can say the Congress was charting a new path in direction of socialism. So it created some restlessness among those leaders who were having some rightist tinge. For example, Vallabhbhai Patel, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, etc. The next session was Haripura session in 1938. And this session was presided over by Subhash, just as a successor to Gandhi, you can imagine. And it was in Haripura session of 1938 that the Congress for the first time constituted the so-called planning committee. And in planning committee, who became the president? Can you guess? Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Subhash was the president of the whole session, and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was declared to be the president of the so-called planning committee. It has to formulate the future economic planning for India. So in Haripura session, up to Haripura session, the Congress became restless, particularly the leaders with rightist leanings. Here, what about Gandhi? So here Gandhi definitely played some dubious role. Dubious role in that sense, actually it is still a matter of surprise for me that Gandhi, being a very, you can say, the leader of the first water and the leader of the first month he was having, particularly his leadership is supposed to have risen above all sorts of petty and parochial politics. But in case of Subhash, possibly he developed some personal grudge. Because I have just gone through different sources. Here I cannot defend Gandhi on this ground because I have gone through different sources, you can say. Because Rudranshu Mukherjee, he has done the very just a research work. And then you can say, and different sources, different books, you can say, not to speak of the textbook like Bipan Chandra, but the separate books I have just gone through. And here you can say, I just come to realize that Gandhi was having some personal grudge in that sense, whenever there was the question of selection of president. So firstly, he tried to choose Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, and he tried to persuade Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. At that time, Maulana Azad was a member of Congress committee. Gandhiji was having the logic behind that or argument behind that. In fact, Maulana Azad, because in India the communal tensions are growing on, or Maulana Azad is coming from a minority community. So if Maulana Azad will take the charge, so that will ease the tensions and appease the minority group in India. But Maulana Azad was himself coming from Calcutta, and Subhash Chandra Bose was also from same Calcutta, and Subhash was a leader of higher stature up to this period than Maulana Azad, and Subhash was day by day growing in popularity at Calcutta. So for that fear, Maulana Azad withdrew his claim. He refused to take the post. So then Gandhi talked to Nehru. Nehru was at that time in foreign country, out of India. So Gandhi tried to persuade Nehru that you should be president again, but Nehru refused. Here point is that if Gandhi was having against, sometime if some people is making a point on the ground that Gandhi was not having reservation against Subhash, rather he was having reservation against socialism. If it was the case, then why did Gandhi invite Nehru in spite of the fact that Nehru was himself an staunch socialist. It means he was not having reservation against leftist as much reservation he was having against Subhash personally. Subhash came to realize, he just wrote to his friend also, and he was well aware of the fact that although he presided over the session at Haripura, but in Tirupuri he was not given the chance. At that time Tirupuri was not clear, but in the next session possibly I have not to be given the chance by the Congress. So he was having some sort of apprehension in this regard. In the meantime, you can say Gandhi just chose the candidature of Sitar Maiya. Surprisingly, Sitar Maiya was not even consulted. Even the idea and even the advice was not taken from Sitar Maiya. Even his note was not taken, and Gandhi in a hurry declared his name. Subhash in the first response, Subhash told, Maulana Azad firstly tried to persuade Subhash better to resign and give opportunity to Sitar Maiya to be a unanimous candidate. But Subhash refused. Subhash told कि first of all, this Sitar Maiya has not been selected by Congress Executive Committee. It was not the choice. It was you, yani Maulana Azad, who was the choice of this committee. But you refused. If Acharya Narendra Deva is ready to take the charge, I am not having the objection. But Sitar Maiya is very reluctant candidate. So what is the use of Sitar Maiya? There is no use. And I think I don't deem fit to resign from the Congress. And then he declared that basically the selection of Congress candidate is based on a very wrong method and wrong procedure. Someone is being selected as a president without any cause and without any, you can say, veracity. It is a better method. The president should be given the chance to be cleared on the basis of his program. The president should present his program, and it is on the basis of the program there should be the selection of the president. This or that should be the president of the Congress. So Subhash just presented this proposal and declared that whatever base work I have done in Haripura session, so it needs a further session to be completed. So I am not having any option but to stand as a candidate and fight the election on the basis of my program. So in next election, what happened, it happened that Subhash won the elections. He got 1577 votes, Sitar Maiya simply 1380. So Sitar Maiya was a loser. And it was not Sitar Maiya who was loser, but Gandhi was practically a loser. So he accepted this, he burst into tears, and even he just shown his emotional outburst and declared that the defeat of Sitar Maiya is my defeat. And then he even threatened to resign from the Congress and to take sannyas from, or you can say take renunciation from active politics. So whole of the Congress fell down on his feet. My student, here I have to draw attention to the phenomena. It is said that if Gandhi threw out Subhash from the Congress, so the question arises, if Subhash was a winner of the elections, then why did whole Congress platform could have been hijacked by Gandhi? It means that Gandhi was having greater influence on this Congress. At that time, the candidature of Sitar Maiya as Gandhi's protege, so it has not been taken seriously by other members. But when there was the question arises, either Gandhi or Subhash, the Congress as a whole chose Gandhi, not Subhash. You can very well find here the case. So it means that Gandhi was enjoying the larger popularity within the Congress, Second thing, very few people is having the knowledge about the fraught relationship between Vallabhbhai Patel and Subhash. मतलब सुभाष और वल्लभ भाई पटेल के बीच क्या दिक्कतें थी, सो मुझे लगता है कि कॉमन पीपल को पता नहीं है, जरा वह भी जान ले. इनफैक्ट वल्लभ भाई पटेल was having the personal grudge against Subhash. Point was that you might have heard the name. The elder brother of Vallabhbhai Patel was Vithalbhai Patel. And Vithalbhai Patel was a close associate of Chittaranjan Das. Chittaranjan Das was the political guru of Subhash. So Subhash was having the very close relationship with Vithalbhai Patel. Vithalbhai Patel, in his last days, he was dying in a foreign country. So Subhash Chandra Bose did his nursing very well, nursed him very well and provided all sorts of service. So he was so much impressed with Subhash ki he, as his will, he wrote 3/4 of his property in the name of Subhash, not for the personal use, means ki in the name that ki Subhash will spend the money for promotion of national politics, as well as he just spend the money for the propagation of Congress and its ideology even in foreign countries and so on. So Vallabhbhai Patel was much upset, and Vallabhbhai Patel just brought a proposal before Subhash in 1938 at the time of Haripur Session, कि better to submit this property to the Congress, and the Congress had to utilize the property at its discretion on the basis of constituting a committee. So a committee would be constituted by the Congress, and this committee will suggest ki how this money had to be utilized, the money by Vithalbhai Patel. So in this way it was decided, but in the last moment there was this proposal could not fructify, could not given the direction of implementation. What might have been the reason? So this proposal could not fructify. So finally, some legal battle started between Subhash and Vallabhbhai Patel, and finally it was Vallabhbhai Patel who won this legal battle, and from the Mumbai High Court he got the degree in his favor, so verdict in his favor. So Subhash had to lose this property. So finally you can say it created further tension between Subhash and Vallabhbhai Patel on the issue of the property of Vithalbhai Patel. So in the last you find, and Vallabhbhai Patel was in the Congress committee, so he was ready to oppose Subhash at every stage, So this was the case, and when whole of the Congress fell down on the feet of Gandhi, so then Gandhi gave a challenge to Subhash, if you are a president, Congress has selected you as the president, so you can form your executive committee, you are free to do that. And when Subhash formed his executive committee, this event has taken place in 1939. So Subhash, when formed his executive committee, in the meantime, the members of socialist members, he selected socialist members, but the socialist members simply resigned on the ground that Subhash has used some vituperative language for me. Subhash has not used respectable language for us. It was simply a lame excuse, I think, and it is on this basis they resigned. So Subhash came to realize that we have picked up the quarrel with such a you can say heavyweight in Congress. It is very difficult to survive in Congress without Gandhi and with the animosity of Gandhi. So he finally resigned from the presidentship. Rajendra Prasad has taken the charge of the president, and the Subhash at that time in 1939 formed the forward bloc. But still he was the chairman of PCC and president of PCC of Bengal. When Bengal Congress, Bengal Provincial Congress Committee, he was the chairman at that time. He was the president or chairman of this Bengal Provincial Congress Committee. And he was likely to launch a movement in the same status without the prior consultation from the All India Congress Committee. And Vallabhbhai Patel was in All India Congress Committee, so possibly he brought a new provision that any provincial committee could not conduct and could not launch any movement at regional basis, or could not launch any new program at regional basis without the prior approval from All India Congress Committee. So it was at that time, you can say, Subhash had given some statement against the Congress committee as a whole. So making basis of the charge, the All India Congress Committee sacked him, and from this provincial Congress president of Congress Committee, and even for, as I am informed, for some years even his primary membership was snatched. So my student, here the point is that Subhash, it is true from the mainstream politics he was thrown outside for some time, and here you can say the role of Gandhi is slightly dubious. But here my point is that Gandhi and Subhash both were having the different path, the same journey. Now here just move to other direction, you will come to know what was the role of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. So here, my student, you should come to realize that Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru has remained to be the closest friend of Subhas. On most of the political issues, both were having the identical views. So there is no question of the rivalry between Gandhi and Subhas. As for the, you can say, as for the lust for power, here you have to be informed that at that time, whether it may be Gandhi, Nehru, Subhas, whatever might be the leader, not to speak of Gandhi. Gandhi was, you can say, above that. But even Nehru, Subhas, Patel, whatever might be the leader, in comparison to today's politics, the politics was at that time much clean. Lust for power was not at that time a political culture of India. It was a very different thing at that time. It is true that there was ideological battle. So Gandhi was having the ideological difference with Subhas, and it is true that Gandhi became slightly harsh to Subhas in Tripuri Congress. As for Nehru, particularly after the demise of his father, death of his father Motilal Nehru in 1931, Nehru started to look to Gandhi as a fatherly figure, and he was emotionally depending much over Gandhi. So he was not in a position to take any stand against Gandhi. Or although he was also having the difference with Gandhi, even Gandhi has accepted that we are having more differences than similarity on the most of the issues today. Even Gandhi accepted this. But in spite of the ideological difference, Nehru was emotionally depending over Gandhi, but Subhas was much articulate against Gandhi and articulate in criticism against Gandhi, and he was ready to clash with Gandhi on certain issues. But my friend, it was not still you can say, if you are taking the example of Tripuri as the single one and as the separate case, so both were having the respect for each other. Do you know? I'll just inform you, it was Subhas who had characterized Gandhi as the father of nations. When he was on Tokyo radio, when he was leading the INA, at that time, he gave a speech, and the famous speech, the father of the nations, the last battle for Indian freedom has started, and I am seeking just some sort of grace from your side, some sort of oblation, some sort of, you can say, the well wishes from your side. So in this way, it was Subhas who coined the term father of nations for Gandhi, and Gandhi in return used to call Subhas a great patriot, मतलब एक महान देशभक्त. And in 1940, when Subhas was parting with Gandhi, at that time, Gandhi told Subhas, Subhas, you will take your path and you have to move on your path. If you will, your path will work and you will be successful in this objective, because both were well aware of the fact that the goal is the same goal, and that is the Indian freedom. You will be successful in your objective and in your endeavor. So I will be the first person who will greet you at your success. So it was a very healthy type of rivalry, you know. And Subhas at that time in 1939, the Second World War started. It gave a new opportunity for Subhas. And here I have not to repeat the story, how did Subhas, you can say, just escaped from his Calcutta house, Calcutta bungalow, in the guise of an Afghan. And how did he, taking a passport from Orlando, in the name of Orlando Masotta, an Italian, through via Afghanistan, he moved to gradually, you know, Germany. How did he see Ribbentrop, the foreign minister of Hitler, and then even he was called by Hitler and Mussolini, characterized as Netaji. Then he preferred to move to Japan, where already a revolutionary was waiting at Singapore, Ras Bihari Bose. In Japan, the first batch of INA had already been formed before the arrival of Subhas. But this INA didn't get success. So finally, on 21st October 1943, Subhas formed INA as well as the INA Free Government and INA Force. So my student, here point is that this first one, you have observed the journey. While observing the journey, two things is clear. Firstly, Subhas had remained to be very active in politics, very active in politics. He always occupied the mainstream. He was the leader of the first water. If he could not have moved off India, he could have remained to be active in mainstream politics. So up to Indian freedom, it is true that Nehru could not have remained to be uncontested, because Subhash was equally talented and he was having certain things in his favor. But second one thing, then how did Subhash drift away from mainstream politics? ड्रिफ्ट अवे फ्रॉम मेन स्ट्रीम पॉलिटिक्स मतलब सुभाष कैसे राजनीति की मुख्य धारा से मुड़ गए, अलग हट गए. तो आई हैव ऑलरेडी ब्रीफ द स्टोरी कि ड्यू टू द डिफरेंस विथ गांधी, ही वॉज नॉट हैविंग डिफरेंस विथ नेहरू डायरेक्टली बट विथ गांधी, एंड ही फाइनली ही ड्रिफ्टेड अवे, ही सेल्ड अवे विद द कांग्रेस, एंड देन even there was distance between Nehru and Gandhi because Nehru was much near to Gandhi. अब second one thing here, if Subhash ideology, अब in ideology here I have to inform you, first of all socialism, he was having the belief and having the belief in socialism. But here, my student, I have to inform you, on the front of socialism, Subhash was not having the good record, and not even Nehru. Neither Nehru nor Subhash was having the good record. They appear to be more utopian than the real socialist, because you know that both were coming from the elite family. In case of Subhash, you can see he was coming from Bengal, and in Bengal, what the irony is that from Rabindranath Tagore to Subhash Chandra Bose, all were depending on zamindari income. And in 1928, when there was the formation of later Krisak Praja Party, in Bengal, Tenancy Act was being legislated. Here, the role of Subhash is supposed to be dubious. So here my point is, and although he participated in 3 working class movement, but even Ghanshyam Das Birla was having the strong faith in Subhash, Subhash could not be deadly opposed against capitalism. He was coming from a rich family, and he already knows the benefit of capitalism for India. So my point is that whether it was not simply Subhash and Nehru both were having the very, you can say, dismal track record on the front of socialism. And as for, you will ask me what is the socialism of Nehru, so it appears to be slightly more clear than the socialism of Subhash, because the socialism of Subhash is much vague. Even Subhash Chandra Bose is not much clear what type of socialism he is propagating, because he was talking about the authority, you can say an authoritarian rule. He was just talking that there should be the firstly for running a socialist government, the power should be concentrated into a single party and single man. He was being impressed by the model of Hitler and Mussolini in the matter of government, a powerful leadership. He was even impressed with Mustafa Kemal Pasha of Turkey, a strong party and a strong leader could carry a nation on the path of success. It means that Subhash was not going to be a liberal leader. He was definitely, he favored an authoritarian government, and this authoritarian government could work for the, you can say, welfare of the nation, but not for the freedom of the people. So here my point is, my student, were the people of India, or did the people of India accept this type of government which Subhash had propagated earlier? But as Subhash didn't come to the power, so this thing is not visible how much his model of government was to be accepted. So this is socialism. Second one, you can say he is talking about the authoritarian rule. So that's why some critics even coined the term socialism of Subhash was imbued with fascism as well, because there is the strong leadership, the glorification of leadership, the powerful party, etc., and then he tried to pursue socialism. Second one, so he was not basically a Democrat or liberal Democrat like Nehru. So here you can see some difference between Nehru and Subhash on the matter of authoritarian government and a liberal elected government. This is the point. Next one you find, next one case, as for the minority community. So on the front of minority community, Subhash was having the better record than either Gandhi or Nehru, because he was coming from, he has inherited from the tradition of C.R. Das. And C.R. Das in Bengal, you will come to know, he has developed a better understanding with the Muslims and Muslim leaders. So there was a pact, Das Liaquat Pact, you might have heard about. Nehru Das, जैसे C.R. Das has just, you can say, signed a pact with the Muslim leaders of Bengal, and then you can say he pursued a pursued a politics based on the Hindu-Muslim amity, and Subhash inherited the same thing from C.R. Das. So some of the Bengali leaders, although they are making a hyperbolic claim, it is very difficult to prove at that time, because the ambition of Jinnah, Muslim League, and the turn of politics up to 1940, because up to 1940 Subhash also remained in politics of India, you know, and even Subhash could not counterbalance Jinnah. He was even ready for the fact that Jinnah, you will be given the chance to be the joint Prime Minister of India and Pakistan, but even Jinnah was not ready for that. So basically Jinnah was so, you can say, uncompromising on the issue of the separate state up to this period. So Subhash could have, and the efforts of Subhash might have resulted into averting the partition of India. It was too much and a very ambitious claim and very tall claim at that time. So we cannot going to accept that. But still some Bengali scholars just come to believe that if Subhash would have been the Prime Minister of India, so the partition of India might have been averted. It is a tall claim, but it is clear that on the front of minority community in India, Subhash was having the better track record than Gandhi and Nehru. It is the simple point I think you people may be clear. आप समझ गए होंगे कि इस पर क्या सुभाष का जो रिकॉर्ड है वो गांधी और नेहरू से ज्यादा बढ़िया है अल्पसंख्यक समुदाय के मुद्दे पर. तो this point is here, you know. And up next one, ideology, you have to. Next you can say this one. So now this point is clear. In Subhash ideologies, in the ideology of Subhash, something progressive, something unprogressive. Authoritarian rule is unprogressive. His type of socialism is utopian. He is not having any future program. Now come to INA and the difference with Gandhi. So Gandhi and Subhash both were having the different strategy for Indian freedom. Gandhi ji believed in the method of non-violence. Subhash was ready to even adopt violence if it is going to freedom of India. He was not having the proper respect or reverence for Gandhian type of non-violence and satyagraha. First thing. Second thing, Gandhi just tried to achieve his goal bits by bits. We have to move to freedom through step by step, bits by bits. But Subhash was not ready to wait longer for this freedom, just like Gandhi. He was in hurry for the freedom, and he was ready to accept any method in order to realize the independence or political freedom of India or independence of India. Now here you can use the term for Gandhi, better means could lead to better end, and for Subhash, better end will decide the better means. If your end is better, if your end is pious, if your end is sacred, your means is also sacred. मतलब गांधी का ये मानना था कि अगर हमारा साधन बढ़िया होगा तभी हमारा साध्य अच्छा हो सकता है, और सुभाष का कहना था अगर हमारा साध्य अच्छा है तो हम किसी भी साधन का उपयोग करें उसको अच्छा ही मान लीजिए. बस this was the point of difference between Gandhi and Subhash. And next one you can say कि Gandhi was in a mood to realize freedom or achieve Indian freedom at the efforts of Indian themselves. They were just, it is at the Indian national effort, he preferred to realize the freedom. But Subhas was ready even to take support of any foreign power, any, you can say, outside force for realizing Indian freedom. That's why he knocked at the door of the outside countries like Germany and Japan. One thing, whosoever is doing glorification of Subhas, so definitely they are doing the false glorification. False glorification in that sense, कि Subhas has done a great job, Subhas has formed the INA, this INA might have led to the liberation of India and so on. If Nehru could not have done so, if Gandhi could not have done the leg pulling and this and that, so simply blame game is going on. But no one is properly evaluating the actual contribution of INA. I am going to ask you, in your estimation, what is the most important contribution of INA in Indian national movement? Is my question clear? What is the most important contribution of INA in Indian national movement? My question is very simple answer. If you are going to evaluate the achievement of INA on the basis of its military success or its achievements on military front, it was simply dismal. It did some dismal performance, on military front. Just it set its foot on the outer skirt of India, but it could not move. Number one. Its most important contribution was it undermined the British authority in India forever. It created a permanent fear in the mind of the British government that Indian army is not reliable. INA had just shattered the British myth that the Indians are having the loyalty to salt, and so far as we will work as the good paymaster to Indian soldiers would remain loyal to us in spite of the persistent nationalist appeal. But Subhas shattered the myth, and then he infected nationalist ideas even within Indian army. So he did a great disservice to the British imperialism and finally made the British pack up from India. And this just spread as the wildfire, as the contagious disease. Once soldiers were infected, the INA soldiers were infected, the same infection just spread to the other side, and you might have heard about the Bombay naval ratings. They were inspired by the INA movement. You might have heard about it gave a new vigor to national movement of India, because when the three important leaders from Hindu, Muslim and Sikh, Prem Singh Sahgal, Guru Bakht Singh Dhillo or Shah Nawaz Khan, they were put into the Red Fort with 20,000 soldiers. So trial started. So sympathy wave went in their favor, and it infused a new life in the national movement of India. So this was the contribution of INA. Its military success is not contribution. This is the first one. Second one factor was this INA, in one sense, even worked on the front of liberation of women. Liberation of women in that sense, it did a lot of work for the liberation of women. Even for the gender empowerment, INA is the burning example. Subhash Chandra Bose, you can say Indian government was vacillating for a long time, and recently it has become ready to giving combatant role to women cadres. But at that time, it was Subhash Chandra Bose who even at that time 𝐾𝐥𝐸𝐬 regiment he formed, and he directly gave the combatant role to women. It was a great achievement of INA from the viewpoint of empowerment of women actually. But there is another side of coin as well. We should not simply turn to be hagiographic about Subhash Chandra Bose and did simply false glorification. Just try to observe the things from the prism of reality as well. Reality is that Subhash Chandra Bose has took support of Japanese for the freedom of India. You might have heard a Hindi proverb, रोपे पेड़ बबूल का तो आम कहाँ से खाए. means कि Japan was having the very bad track record on the front of freedom. In Southeast Asia, in the hope of the false freedom, the nationalist leaders of Southeast Asia cooperated with Japanese, and Japanese just enslaved them. Later, Japanese proved even worse than the European imperialist. Even today, the nations of Southeast Asia and East Asia, including China, they are just, you can say, they are reminiscent of those tragic memory which they had manifested at the time of Japanese occupation. The women were thrown into brothel, and they had to work as the comfort women for Japanese soldiers. So, point is that if Japanese soldiers Subhash INA could have entered into India, and even if it could have captured India and made British flee from India as in Singapore and Malaya, so did Japanese provide us the free hand for running our nation, or try to establish a proxy government in India, or Japanese might have played even the worst role? It is very difficult to decide. So my student, point is that as different rivers are merging to a single ocean, so different journeys and different paths were merging to the same objective of freedom. Gandhi differed with Subhash because Gandhi was not convinced with the path of Subhash towards freedom. All Indian leaders were having the strong reservation against the reputation of Japanese, and they were worrying the Japanese invasion. Subhash was having the different perception about Japanese, and he's taking support of Japanese. Subhash was not having belief in Gandhian Satyagraha. He was having belief in his own method. My question is, if Subhash should not be blamed for why did he not believe in Gandhian Satyagraha, even Gandhi should not be blamed for why Gandhi didn't believe in Subhashian method. Likewise, if Subhash was not lost his faith into Gandhian, the Nehruvian liberal democracy, and he believed in authoritarian government for the positive change in a nation, like Mustafa Kemal Pasha and many others. So he was having his own path and own model of development of India. So here so Subhash should not be compelled to accept Gandhian, Nehruvian worldview. So even Nehru should not be compelled to accept the worldview of Subhash. So here you can say no leader should be blamed. Why did he not accept his method and her method? All were the great nationalists, all were the great patriots, all were worked for the freedom of India. My student, I am worried about one thing. You might have heard about rewriting of history. I am worried about the rewriting of history. Rewriting of history is not simply, remembrance. Remembrance is a good thing. If someone has been just neglected in history, please remember. But remembrance should not be at the cost of forgetfulness. Remembrance and forgetfulness both are the two sides of the same coin. So remembrance of one leader should not be at the cost of forgetfulness of other. So this is my view. Be neutral, be the student of history, try to be neutral and dispassionate while making evaluation of different leaders. So this is my own advice for you people, and can I guess you may be clear what I have just wanted to convey you. Please make a dispassionate evaluation of the different leaders in the national movement of India. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the next lecture.